Hello my makeup loving friends. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a chatty get ready with me where I put on this face of makeup. So if you're interested in seeing that, then you know this is the video for you. But I have to say a quick caveat because part of this video as well is answering some of your questions about psychology. So the topics of mental health, depression, and even a little bit of talk of coronavirus do come up. So if this is potentially triggering to you, or you think that it might be difficult to listen to, it may be best to X out of the video. However, if not, do please keep on watching because this does affect my statistics. The longer you watch these things, the better it is for me, you know. So, you know, if it is triggering, maybe just mute me, you know, just mute me. It's the only time in life that you can do that. But if you are interested in seeing what questions were asked, how I answer them, and I suppose how I did this face of makeup, not that it's wildly difficult, then do please keep on watching. So I figure I won't do anything wildly difficult today because the focus of this is essentially answering your questions. I'm just going to clip my fringe back because it is getting a little bit unmanageable. Yeah, I know. So first thing I'm going to be doing is just a pram in my eyelids. So I have to try and figure out where I put my brushes. I did actually wash them again last night. I did an Elena and actually washed as I went along. Who am I? What's happening? Am I even the same person? Very difficult to know. So I'm just using this Benefit Some Kind of Gorgeous in the shade medium, which is way too dark for me, but whatever, I'm trying to use it up. So there you go. I got quite a few questions. I was surprised because let's face it, I'm not really a proper YouTuber. And by proper YouTuber, I mean I don't really have many subscribers. I don't get many views for my videos. I'm not big, but I am big. But I'm not important. So it was quite cool to see that some of you guys were interested. So I have a few questions in all. I did write them out just to keep track. So I have them written here. And I will be putting my glasses on and off so I can actually read them because obviously I can't read them without my glasses because that's where I am with my life. So I've just put on the concealer, not doing a hell of a lot with it because I'm lazy. There we go. So I've kind of structured the questions in such a way that I think it'll make sense to answer them in this order. Feel free to disagree. So the first one is, that was sent by a friend of mine. Do you ever do your makeup and it messes up so it puts you into a bad mood? It's not necessarily psychology related, but it kind of is. Yes, I totally do mess up my makeup. If you watch some of my videos, you will see me getting what some could only call exasperated. So I definitely do. I get miffed with myself, absolutely. And I mean, there's loads of psychology to state why we would get miffed with ourselves. I am using the Jessup 223 Petite Eye Blender here. And I'm going into, which shade? Of course, the names are there and I can't be arsed to try and find them. This is, by the way, the Morphe 39S palette. I figured it'd be fun to use it. So I'm just going into that shade, whatever it is, and just generally mapping out the eye. So yes, I do get into a bad mood if my makeup doesn't go right, but I have a tendency to kind of, I'm like, if I've put this much effort into it, it's staying on, and I will keep it on just out of sheer stubbornness. But now we're on to the more psychology questions. So the first one being, what made you want to do psychology? This is an interesting one because I think actually this seems to apply to everyone that I know that has done psychology. Everyone has gone into this for a particular reason, not necessarily because they're like, oh, I find it interesting. Sometimes that's like a secondary or a tertiary reason, but for a lot of people it's because they've had first-hand experience of psychological disorders, or they're looking for an answer. Like a friend of mine, she ended up going into psychology because her son was diagnosed with autism and she was essentially looking for answers around that. So that's why she went into it. For me, the reason why I went into psychology is I think I've kind of said this before on my channel, but I struggle an awful lot with mental health. I have quite a severe anxiety disorder and panic disorder and depression. So I've got a nice little trifecta going. So for me, I found like my teenage years very, very difficult. And I found it very, very difficult to get the supports necessary to kind of try and survive. So I became very interested in mental health and kind of the structures around supporting that and why people may feel the way they do. So that's why I went into psychology, because it impacted me firsthand. But then I wandered into a very particular field in psychology, which is applied behavior analysis. And part of why I went into that is because I have a few family members with autism, and it kind of impacts me quite directly. So I ended up really falling in love with applied behavior analysis and kind of the research around that, and it being essentially a support network for individuals with autism. Of course, not everyone will agree. There's a lot of anti-ABA rhetoric, so I probably won't put applied behavior analysis in the thumbnail because some people will get annoyed. It is what it is. I'm using the same brush again because I'm an animal. God damn it. And I'm going into this shade here, whatever it is, who knows. And I'm just going to pop that on top. The next question then I have was, what made you want to be a lecturer rather than, say, a profiler or a direct provision practitioner? Well, I actually worked as a practitioner throughout my master's and throughout a portion of my PhD. And I am actually a board certified behavior analyst, doctoral level, haha. I'm weirdly proud of that. So I do actually consult on cases, so I do still provide a certain amount of like practical work on that. But the reason why I am more full-time on lecturing than I am on being a practitioner is that one of the things I found very difficult about being a practitioner was inevitably you had to say no to clients. As in you had to, for every client that you would say yes to, that you could take them on, there were 3 or 4 that you unfortunately couldn't take onto your workload because it was wildly unmanageable. And there aren't enough people who are kind of specialised in the field that I'm in, which is, like I said, applied behaviour analysis, and fewer still in relational frame theory, which is my specialty. So I kind of thought to myself, well, how can we address that? The only way that we can really address that is to train people, to have more people be involved in this discipline than there was originally. So I figured ethically it would make a lot more sense if I ended up lecturing in this. I'm using the Jessup 228 Luxe crease, and I'm going to go into this shade here, which is like a purple. So essentially I do still practice, not a huge amount, maybe 3 or 4 hours a week type thing. My full-time job is as a lecturer, but the reason why I went into lecturing full-time was because I want to teach other people to do what it is that I do, because if I can teach even 3 or 4 more people how to do what it is that I do, then that means there's more practitioners available for supports for the people who need them. I'm doing a lot of purple looks recently. Don't know what that's about. Mary, Queen of Purple, you are a bad influence. There you go. Yeah, I'm just blending this out. The next question then, if I remember correctly, was, what's your favourite part of psychology to lecture on? There's a lot of bits in psychology. Because psychology is obviously, it's super, super broad. You've everything from like cognitive psychology to biological psychology, organizational psychology, clinical psychology. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize like how big of an area it actually is. Like, it is huge, humongous, really, really big. So actually, There are a few topics that I really, really enjoy working on. Behavioral psychology being probably the one that I love the most, because that's what I did my master's and my PhD in. So when I get to lecture on that, I get to nerd out, and that makes me super, super happy. I'm going to do, I think, very little on this because I'm kind of lazy. It's just where I am with my life at this point. But yeah, I love lecturing on behavioral psychology. At the moment where I am, we don't have any modules on behavioral psychology yet. I will rectify that, but I do kind of talk about it on other modules like educational psychology and stuff. But I love modules like developmental psychology, and I have weirdly ended up falling in love with teaching research methods in psychology, because I actually think it's a really important skill for everyone to have, to be able to read research and to be able to critique it and understand that it may not be as strong as what the writers are telling you. I think that's a really, really important skill for people to have, is that critical analysis. Lord knows we've gotten into trouble with that before, of people just taking research at face value, and yeah, it's not ideal. Like, it's not ideal. I'm just kind of blending and swishing around here, being very very laissez-faire with the old makeup there now. I'm just bringing it down here. I'm being definitely very, very lazy on this. What do I want to do next? I'm just going to take, excuse me. Oh, I can see you. You're in my jar. I'm going to take this Real Techniques brush here, and I'm going to go into, I have a Juvia's Place concealer, which I'm really enjoying for using on the lid, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a halo. Nothing hugely difficult. So I'm just going to pop that there. So yeah, I was kind of surprised that people had as many questions as they actually did for me. So I was really pleased. So otherwise it would have been a very short video of me just kind of going, nobody cares about me. Yeah, I'll make you feel bad about it. Like, so just popping that there. Sorry, I can't answer questions right now. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. It is not, it's not a very well developed skill in my repertoire. There's a fly going around in this room, and it is driving me a little bit bananas. Oh well, could be worse. Yeah, I find that's a really good concealer to do the thing that I wanted to do. I know, very technical language, but there you go. Just gotta wipe off my fingers because I'm gross and disgusting. Gross and disgusting. I'm going to use this same brush again, and what do I want to do? I'm going to go into this shade here, I think. So next, so I say M or so much. What does it mean to be self-actualized? Okay, so self-actualization comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in order to be self-actualized, you had to have kind of managed to gain certain things in your environment before you get to there. So you have to have like basic things met, like your safety, your security, self-esteem, etc. So it sounds easier than it actually is, but it can be very difficult in society to have all of our needs met. But once you have met all of these needs, he said that at the very top of this, I think I'm actually going to use my finger because I'm gross. And see, will that apply better? Yay! There we go. Sorry, it's a very, very simple look today. Apologies, you'll learn nothing from me. But he would say that once you had hit self-actualization, it was a feeling essentially of contentedness, that you were happy with where you were in life, that you were content with your own solitude, that you had realized your potential. Essentially, it's the pinnacle that you can reach on that. Hopefully that makes sense. It's that you have met all of your talents, Obviously, it takes a lot to get there. It's not an easy goal to get there. It's sort of an end point, but human beings will always strive towards new goals. So it can be very difficult, just even based on that, to reach self-actualization. Sorry, there we go. That'll vaguely do. I'm sorry, there's like mowing outside. How very rude. And I'm going to go into the shade, this, whatever shade this is. And I'm going to go in with my finger because I don't think the brushes pick it up that well. There we go. Ooh, that's a pretty topper. There we go. You'll make my life better. Sorry, back now. I was super distracted by the strimmer outside, so hence me stopping things. So I'm using the Sigma E36. It's a little blending brush to try and soften this out a little bit. So I might actually just look to see where I was in terms of my questions. What is your opinion of empaths? I guess this is quite a loaded question. Do I believe that empaths exist? Do I think they're good? So it's a tricky question to answer. Yes, I do believe that empaths exist because there are people who are just better at picking up on physiological cues of other people. They're better at reading body language, etc. We also know that there are just people who do pick up on other people's emotions for better or for worse. Whether or not I think it's a good thing, evolutionary psychologists would have a lot to say on that. So we have developed all of these things for a reason, like they may be adaptive. So yeah, that looks nice. So evolutionary psychologists would state that probably the people who are really good at this, they're the ones who are picking up on social relationships really, really well. Excuse me. I'm going into this purple shade again. I'm using the E36 with it. So it may be really adaptive for social relationships because you know how other people are feeling. So are they happy with you? Are they annoyed with you, etc.? So in that sense, it could be highly, highly adaptive. But in the sense in which it can be very detrimental, it's if you're picking up on other people's negative emotions and you're in a position in which you're constantly picking up on negative emotions, that can be quite draining for a human being. We can't kind of be in negative situations at all times. So it's not a cut or dry that it's good or it's bad. It's very context specific and it has kind of developed for a reason. It does seem to be adaptive. Let me see. I'll take another brush now. Thinking this like Juvia's Place brush and I'm going into that purple, but I'm also going to mix it with this kind of glittery black. So I'm going to smoosh the two of them together as I am prone to do. Oh lordy, hello. That was far more pigmenty black than I thought it was going to be. But oh well, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You swish on in there. Then the next question that I had was another loaded one. Why are men douchebags? I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment that men are douchebags. I say this as a single woman. I don't have a partner. I think it depends very much on the person. I think, however, if you're looking at men versus women, we have very different interaction styles. So even in terms of like the way in which we manifest our aggression, it's very different amongst women than it is amongst men. Men have much more physical aggression than women. But our overall aggression is actually very similar, like our aggression levels, because women aggress in a different way. We will aggress in a method that's called relational aggression. I would actually say it's far more damaging than physical aggression because relational aggression is far more psychological in nature and focuses much more on almost tearing a person down. So the ways in which we communicate and let our dissatisfaction be known are very, very different, is what I would say on that. Taking the same brush again, and I'm going into, oh, excuse me, oh, just a lash there, sorry. And I'm going into this shade here. So I wouldn't say that it's that men are bad or that women are better or women are bad and men are better. I would say it's just a difference in terms of communication styles. And then there was a follow-up question, which was, how do you get the guy? Again, a very, very loaded question. You could do the general strategy of, there's loads of things in psychology that would state that we attribute things to be good, i.e. not just in, i.e. like in terms of personality and general worth, if they look pretty. So even things like looking nice, smelling nice, you know, the very basic surface characteristics. Weirdly, there's research that shows if you wear the color red, that really works, you know. The other thing I would say would be this thing called stimulus-stimulus pairing, where you kind of associate yourself with the things that that person really enjoys and likes. So if they like football, you are going to football with them, or you are providing them with tickets to go to see football. Now that's very, very superficial, and I wouldn't recommend that at all, because I don't think you should just be looking for somebody for the sake of, oh, I have this man-shaped hole in my life, I had best get somebody. Because if it's right, it's right. In saying that, it doesn't mean that all relationships are super easy, and it's funny for me to say that because I'm single, but I do think that open lines of communication are very, very important. Don't just assume that because you say that you're fine, that he's going to understand, actually, I'm really peed off with you right now. You can't expect somebody to understand what's going on in your mind. Men struggle a little bit more with perspective taking than do women. That's just science. So I would say lots of communication, shared interest, but also some space where both people can kind of develop and do their own thing. That is my advice on that. I'm going to go and do like my lashes, and I'm going to do that off camera because quite frankly that's dull, and I get so into it that I forget what's happening around me. So, okay, I put on some lashes, so I think the next thing that I will be doing is putting on a primer. So I just have a Benefit That Gal Brightening Face Primer. I'm opening up a new one. Please excuse me, my hands are probably filthy, but there you go. And I'm just going to smoosh that onto my face. I think I remember hearing somewhere that you have to like pat it on. I don't know, you'll learn nothing here. The next question that I got, and I actually got this several times, and I know a few people were like, oh, do we necessarily want to talk about the coronavirus? I haven't talked about it that much on my channel, not because I don't think it's important, but because I kind of figure we're probably on overload and probably have heard too much about it. But considering quite a few people were asking this particular question, I figure I had best answer it. So the question was, what sort of an impact do I think social distancing will have on mental health, and what might the potential be in terms of a lockdown? I'm also going to use this to cover up my green, not my green bits, but more red bits because my skin is being weird. Yeah, that is a tricky question. I've my sponge here, and I'm just going to use my Hourglass foundation in the shade Alabaster. It's a difficult one to answer because I'm giving answers that may not be to everybody's liking, but you also have to remember it is my opinion mixed with what I understand of psychology. Now this is quite unprecedented. We've never really had anything like this before. So I can't even go to data and kind of go, this will be the impact. However, what I am drawing my opinion on is data based upon human beings' needs for social supports. and social connection. We know, like, things like, say, for instance, the LGBT community, if they're coming out and they're dealing with discrimination, etc., they actually deal with it a lot better, like in terms of their well-being, if they have social supports. So it kind of shows how critical social supports actually are in terms of our well-being and in terms of us, like, getting on and doing things. That looks quite nice, I think. Excuse me. So my thing there would be, it's not going to be good in terms of our mental health. I think we're going to see a huge increase in terms of anxiety, mood disorders, general. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an increase in suicidality. Sorry if that upsets people. That, again, this is just my opinion. I do think the extent of that is actually going to be quite big. I'm just using NARS concealer in the shade Gently. So yes, I think actually we're only at the start of this to see what psychological impact it has. And what's interesting is not just the social isolation that I think is a big factor here, but I think it's also the role of media, of social media, things like WhatsApp groups, Snapchat, etc., and how that's feeding into fear. Like, over the last week or so, people have been kind of freaking out over whether or not there's going to be a lockdown, and people are, of course, then bulk buying things that they don't necessarily need to be buying. Why are you buying so much toilet paper, guys? Unless it's to build a fort, it's not an appropriate answer. So in addition to the social isolation, we also have a lot of fear mongering and feedback from social media saying, oh, people are doing this, there's riots, this is happening. So that's feeding into fear. And if we feel that we're in an insecure environment, it comes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We'll never reach the height of self-actualization because we are so in fear for our physical safety and security around the basic needs that we have. So I think it's not even just the social distancing. I also think it's the impact of social media in that particular instance. In saying that, though, I think it's obviously, this is not me advocating and saying, oh, social distancing is so bad, you shouldn't do it. We have to do this. It's necessary. We have to ethically do this to protect vulnerable members of our society and make sure that we are flattening the curve, as they say. But that is, of course, a research methods term, which I do enjoy. But we do have an ethical obligation to make sure that we are taking care of vulnerable members of society. That's the way that I see it. But it does, of course, come at a cost to our mental health. I'm just using the Laura Mercier powder in translucent. I'm picking it up on my Real Technique sponge. So I think there are lots of things that we can do to potentially kind of balance that out. So social distancing, of course, means that we cannot physically be around other people. So of all of the times in history for this to occur, this is probably one of the best, in the sense that our technology has caught up with us. If this had happened 20, 30 years ago, it would have been much more difficult. We have things like WhatsApp, we have Facebook Lives, we have Netflix parties that we can interact with. So I actually think it's vitally important that people use those particular resources to help decrease the impact of that, to actually put in some routine into their lives in terms of, at this time I'm going to Skype such and such a person, at this time I'm going to FaceTime them, I'm going to WhatsApp them, keep into groups, do maybe Facebook Lives. Social distancing does not mean social isolation. It just means that we cannot physically be near each other at the moment. I am taking a Morphe brush and I'm just kind of going through my brows. So yeah, I think the impact will be quite negative, but I think there's lots of things that we can do to kind of protect around that. And as long as we have the understanding that it's a potential outcome, we can do something on it. I'm taking this Benefit Cabrow in the shade 5, and I'm just going to barely sweep it through my brows because I don't want too much colour in it, because I have big bushy brows. So hopefully that answers that question on the impact that I think that lockdown and social distancing will have. I do want to emphasize that this is just a temporary measure. We are not going to be in lockdown or social distancing for the rest of our lives. We just have to cope with it for however many weeks that we are being advised to do so by scientists and medical practitioners. But it's for our greater good. But I do think it's very important that we put into practice some things around mental health and ensuring that we are having that be a core value of ours. I'm now taking the Benefit Ready Set Brow. It's a clear gel and just putting that through there. I'm getting through my makeup a lot quicker than I necessarily thought I would. Anybody else surprised? I'm definitely surprised. I am taking Anastasia Stick Foundation in the shade Mink, and what I like to do is just kind of put it on my sponge like this because I'm gross sauce, and then just do this and this. Sorry, you'll get nothing definitive here in that sense. What was the next question? I do have them all written down. Okay, next question was, do I think that people are born evil? Is it part of their upbringing, or is it down to some sort of a chemical imbalance? This is a very, very big question, and it depends on who you answer or who you ask. I think it's an interaction between biological chemical imbalances and the upbringing that we have, because what is being evil? We could categorize it as being somebody who scores very high on traits of sociopathy and psychopathy. But there are plenty of people who score highly on these traits that don't actually physically hurt people. A core example of this is that actually CEOs and politicians score much more highly on those traits than do the general population. So if they are showing those biological innateness, but they aren't physically harming people, then what's the difference between them and the likes of Edmund Kemper, Ted Bundy, all of those who have committed horrific atrocities? They, of course, have what we would consider to be a potential chemical imbalance, but they had the perfect storm of growing up in abusive homes. Again, caveat there being there are people who grow up in abusive homes that don't end up being sociopaths. So it does just seem to be a perfect storm, from what I understand, of a chemical imbalance, a biological innateness mixed with an inappropriate environment for growing up in. That would be my 2 cents on that. I want to finish, or do I don't know what I want to do. Please help. It's all very confusing here. What is the next question? Do I think that people ever truly get over depression, or is it a case that it is intermittent throughout life? That's a tricky one to answer, and the reason why it's so tricky to answer is our understanding of depression is always evolving. Psychology in itself is a very recent science. It's only just a little over 100 years old. I'm using Benefit Hula, by the way. It's just a little over 100 years old. And you have to think about the way that we were treating depression for years. It was just, off you go into an asylum, bye. So we're still figuring things out. Drugs that we were using in the 60s we're not using anymore because we know that they had long-term impacts. I don't know is essentially the answer to that. What I will say is, if you do have a chemical imbalance, it may be a case that you need to have antidepressants for your entire life. Nothing wrong with that. It's like, if a diabetic has to have their insulin, like, there's nothing wrong. It's just their body isn't producing it. So we have ways around that. But we do know that there are certain contexts that will make things more difficult for people to deal with their mental health. So as I was kind of alluding to there, I do think we're going to see an increase in terms of mental health issues around this self-isolation. So sometimes there are just contexts that bring it up. So it's not as simple as kind of saying you are biologically predisposed to be depressed. You can be, but you could be put, again, like I said, into this perfect storm of really rubbish situations, and even with all of the psychological strength in the world, you're gonna struggle with it. I'm just gonna wipe off the powder from under my eyes here. There we go. Hopefully I've answered that question. If not, it means I'm really rubbish at my job, but it's fine because I'm not getting paid for this particular one. It's a Sunday. Do you think people what are your thoughts on the studies conducted at Beckley showing the efficacy of pilocycline's ability to help with treatment-resistant depression? So that kind of builds on from this particular question. Bear with me now because I want to kind of do my shadow on my under eyes, and that does require me to have a little think about things. Hello friends. I'm taking, do I want that or do I want something else? I don't know what I want, guys. Help me. Oh, why is life so difficult? What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. I'll take the 226. So I'm taking my Jessup 226 smudger, and I'm going into this shade here. It's like a pale pink. Please excuse me. So there were studies conducted at Beckley, and they showed that giving pilocyclines to individuals with treatment-resistant depression while also exposing them to psychotherapy showed really beneficial results. Sounds great. I'm all for that, and I'm all for research, Lord knows. Caveat around that is the research itself had a very small sample size. So when we see something that has a small sample size, it means we can't really generalize massively about the results themselves. Okay? They also didn't have a control group. And to me, that's very important, because a control group helps us to monitor whether or not the outcomes that we are seeing are due to placebo effect. So this was a very, very simple design. It is what we would call like an A-B design. It's barely quasi-experimental. Research methods wise, it's not fantastic. In saying that though, promising results, very interesting to look at. I checked to see if there are any replications of the research. There are, but they're all by the same people in the same lab. So I can't take that as gospel either. So unless more methodologically strong studies like a randomized control design are employed, I kind of can't say much on that. I think it's very interesting and I'd like to see more data on it, but as it is, I'm using the same brush again. I'm going into this shade here. I think the data is too tentative. There was a study back in 2016. They have another one in 2018, but it's all done by the same guy. So again, I wouldn't go out there and get a ton of this drug and be like, hey, I have treatment-resistant depression, but this is the thing that's going to help with this, because the data doesn't really show that necessarily. So I would just be super, super tentative on that. I can't recommend things unless there's an actual evidence base behind that. I am morally obligated to point those sort of things out. What do I have to do next? Like, I feel like I've done whole chunks of things. Oh, I have to do my inner waterline, but I have to try and figure out exactly what it is that I want to do with that. So in the interim, you can just chat amongst yourselves and be all like, she's a brilliant mind. JK. I have this Dose of Colours Cloud Wine eyeliner, and I think it could be kind of fun to use. Let's see. What are your thoughts? Oh yeah. How do you feel about gender roles masking autism in women, in some cases making it harder to diagnose, and do you think this will change? That is my kind of question, because excuse me, so much of my applied practice, I was going to do my lips. I'm not doing my lips, I'm doing my eyes. Jesus. So much of my applied experience is actually with individuals with autism. The current stats state that men outnumber women in terms of an autism diagnosis 4 to 1. The diagnosis changed back in 2013 with the new DSM-5, and it had been a triad of impairments, and it's now gone to a dyad of impairments. So the first being impairments in social communication, and the second being repetitive restrictive movements. So where gender roles comes in here is essentially the expectation that boys are to be boisterous, and when they're not boisterous, that's something that we get very nervous about. Whereas girls are expected to be quiet, so when they are quiet, it's just fulfilling the societal norms. So as a result, a lot of girls go undiagnosed with autism when they may have all of the other aspects that come with it. So, for instance, an inability to understand complex language like sarcasm, metaphors, difficulty with humor, repetitive restrictive behaviors, so like hand flapping, hair twirling, that sort of thing. What do I want to do next? Okay, I want to do blush. Bear with me. What do I want to do? Come here, blush. Okay, I have this. That's part of my project Pan. I'm just taking a Real Techniques brush and going into that sauce. So I think a lot of women go undiagnosed because of this expectation that girls are not to be seen. However, in saying that, we had the DSM-4, which was put into place in 1994. It got put away in 2013. We ended up with the DSM-5. That's why we no longer have Asperger's syndrome as a diagnostic criteria or category anymore. And actually, since we came in with that, the sensitivity and the specificity of the test, so being able to pick up true cases and being able to make sure that people who are being diagnosed with autism actually have autism, have much increased. And actually that's why we're seeing in part that the diagnosis rates of autism have increased, is because we've gotten better at diagnosis. Currently, the ICD is in its revision, so they will likely kind of mimic the DSM-5, because they're still kind of more on the DSM-4's conceptualization of what autism is. But we are always reviewing things in terms of research, making it sound like I'm the one who's doing that. I'm not. I'm not involved in that. But I can totally see that they will end up changing things. Oh, I don't want to put on some mascara. Apologies. And the final question, because thank Christ, we're nearly there. Well done me. The final question then was in relation to attachments, and attachments formed early in childhood, and whether if we have these attachments early on in childhood, is it a bad thing if we don't have them prior to the age of 2? Now they worded it far more articulately than me, but I'm currently trying to put mascara on, so it's hard to think in these ways. That's a tricky question to answer. It's something I would usually give a whole lecture on. My second year students would probably tell you that I annoy them about that sort of thing. I am just going to use my Pixie glow mist to, well, glow to the heavens. It's nice. I like to put like a setting spray on before I do my highlighter, because I think it actually makes the highlighter pop a little bit more. And I'm using a Benefit cookie, and I'm using the little thing that came with it because I'm an animal. Right, so let's get to the question. Yes, if you don't have attachments formed prior to the age of 2, this does have really negative consequences. The ideal attachment that we want to see formed is secure attachment, and that usually is present amongst 60% of the population. We know that if you don't form these attachments, that actually it impacts everything from your formation of friendships to romantic relationships. Now, in saying that, when people talk about attachments, they often consider it to be attachments to parents or biological parents. That's not actually the case. It is an attachment to another human being. So it could be an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a sibling. And actually, if we have those elements in our lives, I'm going to put on my glasses now because I'm actually at the stage now where I'm almost finished. I'm so glowy. Why am I so glowy? I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to just take my number 7 translucent powder and this big brush here. Sorry, excuse me. So it's difficult to say that people don't have secure attachments at all, because there's usually somebody in the environment that they have kind of attached to. What I will say is, if you haven't made those attachments prior to the age of 2, it makes it much more difficult to form friendships. But if you have formed a friendship in spite of attachments, then usually that can kind of decrease the impact of that. So long story short is that yes, it can have a detrimental effect on the formation of friendships, romantic relationships, etc. But the reality is there's much more to attachments than just, say, an attachment to a parental figure. Hopefully that makes sense. We're nearly there. I've answered all of the questions, and all I have to do now is just put on lipstick, and my lipstick is here. I have the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude in the shade Avril, and I am low-key obsessed with it. No, I'm not putting on lip liner. Don't judge me. There we go. I am going to just go and, like, I don't know, do my hair a little bit, like as in sort out my fringe because it's doing weird things. I'll be back and I'll show you. Actually, I'll zoom you in now so you can see the eyes, because that makes sense. So that is the overall eye look using the Morphe 39S while chatting through things. So hopefully, I think that's actually really nice. I think this is my favourite Morphe palette. I just got this. Anne-Marie, it's your fault. I'll take off the glasses so you can see a bit better. I do think it's really nice. And minimum effort. I like minimum effort. So I'm just going to go finish off the rest of my face hair thing. I'll be back in like 2-3 minutes. So this is the whole look together. I hope you enjoyed this slightly different Get Ready With Me. If you guys like it, I am thinking of possibly doing this maybe once a month or once every 2 months, answering some of your questions about psychology. Pick my brain, don't be afraid to ask. But that is essentially it. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe. I am on social media. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter. You can find me using my name, Teresa Mulhern. Do please share, because sharing is caring unless it's an STD, in which case, you know, wrap it up. Very difficult to do in these social distancing times, but there you go. But I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.